Very much, Denise. I'm just very glad not to be wearing my SNH hat today because of all the things that Denise had a go at in her talk. I have been involved in some way or another. Although I do share all of Denise's frustrations. Let me say that first of all. What I'm here to talk about is talk about slow food, give an international perspective a little bit, and local activities and that we do in Edinburgh. So, you know, slow food, the history and philosophy of slow food, a little bit about that, and what do we mean by good, clean and fair, what Slow Food Edinburgh does, some of the key activities we have, and looking at some of our ambitions in Edinburgh, what the things we're thinking of that we should be doing in the next year or two as a group, and then looking more widely as part of the symposium today, what are some of the outcomes that we collectively should be aiming for, and also especially what are the challenges and opportunities ahead. And Colin and Denise have talked about these, and other people will talk about them as well. But I just want to set out what some of the things I think are important. So about slow food, it was started in Italy in 1986 when our friends McDonald's arrived at the foot of the Spanish Steps, and Carlo Petrini here got so angry about that he set up slow food as the antidote to fast food, effectively. This is Carlo at the 2007 International Congress in Mexico, not making a speech but singing, and he was quite a showman on stage. It is now an international organisation, and there's about 100,000 members around the world in over 130 countries. Most countries around the world have got slow food. It's because it's an Italian organisation. I suspect it's not very strong in France because they're a bit sniffy about it. That's there's nearly 50 local groups in the UK. There's 8 in Scotland. We were at about 10, but recently the East Lothian group and the Linlithgow groups have been merged back into Edinburgh just because the numbers got low and there weren't enough people to run the groups. And as I said, there's 8 convivia in Scotland. About some of the principles of slow food, and I've put pleasure in there on purpose because we'll be talking a lot today about sustainability and about the importance of taking care of the environment and the importance of people being involved. But the thing that Donald Reid, who was my predecessor as chair of the group, wanted me to emphasise was that a lot of what slow food is about the importance of the pleasure in food, about a lot of things that are here being talked about today. And it was good to be having dinner last night and breakfast this morning around a big table. You know, all the community aspects of food and sharing and enjoying what food brings us. It's not just something that gives us energy. It's not just a fuel. So some of the stuff that slow food does is about biodiversity, variety in food. So variety in what we use as food and the types of ways food is prepared and such like. So that is preserved for variety of tastes and flavours, but also, as has been mentioned earlier on, about resilience. You know, the more diverse a system you have, the more resilience you have. And better understanding the links between taste and what we eat, so that a lot of the food we've all probably experienced a lot of very bland food we've bought from supermarkets or elsewhere. So it's the importance of taste and understanding the subtleties of taste between different varieties and different places, different ways things have been prepared. It's also about food communities and about making the links between people and the food that they eat, and between people who eat food and people who produce food, so that those links are maintained, so that the communities are kept together and people understand the consequences of their buying decisions, as Denise and Colin have both mentioned earlier on. You know, if you choose to buy something local, there is a knock-on effect to how the countryside around you looks, and it's important to help people make that connection. So the key principles that slow food has of good, clean and fair, it's about good being good for you, it's nutritious and it tastes good. It's about clean and it's produced in a way that is respectful of the environment. and it's about fair, and so it's about fair reward for producers who are and for their labour, so that it's not exploitation, basically. Briefly about some of the things that we do in Edinburgh. We have a number of regular activities. We have a market stall the first Saturday of every month. And here's the stall with, some of you may recognise Neil Forbes, who doing a cooking demo for us a couple of years ago. We invite a chef from a local restaurant or cafe, or someone who's doing their own catering business, who's within the ethos, is in line with the ethos of slow food. And Denise and her colleagues have been on our stall fairly recently, and they come along and do a cooking demo. They go around the market and they ask producers to give them some of their ingredients, and then cook up something simple with that for people to taste, and the chefs will then explain what they're doing and say, promote this food that they've got from other stalls. So it's providing a sort of focus for people to come and have a chat with a chef, and also to see something being cooked on the premises. We also do a thing called a slow supper, which is we pick a particular restaurant, again, that fits with the slow food ethos, and building a relationship with that restaurant. We have a meal on the second Monday of every month that people can come along, no need to book, you turn up, and a glass of wine and a main course for £10. And it gives people an easy opportunity to come and meet with other people who are interested in food, in slow food, and find out more about slow food without going to an expensive restaurant and having to pay quite a lot of money. So, £10 we see is quite accessible. You can obviously have more than that. I've regularly on a Monday evening spent a lot more than that when I've been to a restaurant where it's got a good menu on. We do a number of specialist events and specialist meals. Recently we had one at a relatively new restaurant in Edinburgh called Divino, which was all about Tuscan food. But we have other themed events as well, which we promote. We have visits to farms and to other producers. So we've been down to Pete's and Heather's at Whitmere a couple of times in the last few years. We're going to Sasha Grayson's and Hugh Grayson's in Perth next Saturday, actually, a group going up there. And we've been to places like Stewart Brewing, which is a microbrewery on the Bilston Industrial Estate just outside Edinburgh. So that gives you a flavour of the types of places we go. We also we're trying to move more on to engaging people about food, encouraging people to think where it comes from and to get more interested in that. So whether it's through going round bakeries, we had a bakery tour of Edinburgh. I produced a list of 17 different places which sold bread, whether they baked it themselves or brought it in from other artisan bakers. We only got through 5 in the Saturday morning we tried, because it took quite a while we were doing it by bus and walking, which was quite an interesting experience. But it was good to kind of go and find out more about, what the bakers were doing. And the big thing we've got coming up in a few weeks' time is what we call the Taste Adventure, which is a way of introducing children to the 5 different senses, and how they can learn about food through the 5 different senses. And that's a project that Slow Food UK headquarters has put together, and it goes around the country, and we're running it for all 4 days at the Highland Show in next month within the Royal Highland Educational Trust's activity centre at the Highland Show. So that's going to be quite interesting. We hope to engage with quite a lot of children. They've told us you should expect to engage with 1,000 kids over those 4 days. So it'll be quite a lot of work for us too. Looking forward then, as I said earlier on, food is to be enjoyed. That's quite a big part of the philosophy of slow food. That's, Carlo Petrini and his colleagues, when they set it up 25 years ago or so, the emphasis was on enjoying food and appreciating it, and recognising that one of the big things that I find in my day job for SNH as well, but certainly in slow food, people will look after what they value much more if they do value it than if it's something they're told to look after, if it's more abstract. So you've got to make things easy for people to make the right choices, as Colin and Denise have already mentioned the same sort of idea earlier on. It's about making more connections, as I said, connecting people with their food, but also connecting producers with potential buyers. So, for example, we had our First Coast hosted our slow suppers from the summer of last year to the autumn, and we put them in touch with Gorgie City Farm, who some of you will know, who are a small farm within the bounds of Edinburgh City, and they produce pigs. And so we made the connection that First Coast would buy some of the pigs from Gorgie, because we'd been helping the Gorgie to sell pigs to our members. But First Coast bought the pigs from carcasses from Gorgie, and did 2 or 3 special meals featuring Gorgie pigs, all featuring Gorgie pigs. So it's making those connections which we can do to an extent in Edinburgh, which is quite important. Connections that mightn't otherwise be made. Not every producer within or around Edinburgh can afford the time to go to the farmers' market, just because they're not necessarily selling to retail out in a retail way like Denise and Chris are doing. But we're also trying to think about what does good, clean and fair mean in an urban setting, and we're still teasing that out, because there's another thing to say is that a lot of the things that Slow Food and many of us here were talking about 15 years ago or so have become more mainstream on the surface of things, and I'll come on to talk about it in a minute or two. So we've got to think, well, if we're just saying the same things we've been saying for a long time, and whereas they're becoming mainstream, what are we adding to this whole debate? We've got to think where we can add value, where we can, the connections we have, the understanding we have, where do we add value to this debate? Moving on then to some wider ambitions, it is important to focus on, and this goes for government as well and us in SNH, but in all this debate, focusing on what the outcome is. What do we want to see happen? What behavioural change do we want to see among producers, among consumers, so that what do we want that to look like in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time? So it's important to think about what we're looking at as the outcome, not just the actions we want, the things we want to do for the next week, the next year. What are we looking at long term? And one of the things would be about better understanding of food chains, and I mean that in a couple of ways. The food chain, the market, how food makes its way from the producer to the consumer, but also the understanding of the ecology, as Denise was talking about, and the connections within biology, as Colin was talking about. And also, going back to something I said a few minutes ago, it's important to help people make the informed choice. People need to know where their food's coming from. They need to know how it's produced. At a basic level, for a lot of people, it's about knowing how to cook. And someone was saying to me last night that a friend of theirs who's a vegetarian nearly was shocked to find that hens lay eggs. And she said this friend nearly fainted when she discovered that, because people this has been talked about for quite a while, that about where does milk come from? Does milk really come from cows? Some kids ask. Do potatoes come from the ground? They thought potatoes were made of chips. Things like this. So there's quite a range of education that's got to be done, and it's you've got to start in some cases from quite a low level. Now, at Edinburgh level, there's 10 of us on the committee and 100 odd members. We aren't going to solve that problem overnight, so we've got to think how we best work with others to do that. And moving on to something else that Colin was especially talking about, the importance of rewarding people who produce quality, who have particular skills, and who look after the land, who have a sense of stewardship. It's important that reward is there, because otherwise, they can't keep doing it. If it's just the race to the bottom, the race to the cheapest possible way of producing something, then those who are producing quality, have a skill, and are demonstrating stewardship, they aren't going to be able to continue for very long. But I also wanted to talk briefly about some of the challenges that we have to recognise, and the risk of greenwash. There's quite a lot of talk about in the last 5 years, especially big companies, not only big companies, but saying, oh, this is sustainability, this is environmentally friendly. Well, what does that actually mean, and is it true what they're saying? There's more recognition now I suspect the law is helping in some way. There's more recognition that if you make exaggerated claims and you get found out, the market helps as well, then you run the big risk of tarnishing your brand for many years to come. So you've got to be, a lot of companies, not all, but a lot of companies are recognizing the importance of being honest about their claims and having them be able to be backed up. Which, the internet and, free information, I was going to say freedom of information, but kind of availability of information, the perfect market, so to speak, is helping with that, because people, if people find something out about a brand that's not that's against what they're claiming, then that information spreads around pretty quickly, and that's got to be helping, pushing people in the right way. The other thing I'm going to claim that I've invented this word bandwagoning, that it's what we were, the whole idea of local food, that's all become quite popular with politicians, and we've got to be careful that what is, the promotion of local food isn't just about putting a local tag on it, and what is still produced in a fairly inhumane way and fairly intensive way, but just because it's local, it's good. There's quite a lot of risky issues around there that we've got to be careful that what we're saying isn't just jumped upon and seen that used as marketing speak. And another thing that we've been talking about before, and is about the whole idea of cost. And those of us who've done any business training will understand the concept of driving out cost. That's been the mantra, and it's been the mantra in agriculture and the food chains for quite a long time. And that's there's certain attractiveness in things being efficient and not being wasteful, whether it's food waste or whether it's doing or whether it's excess miles, people driving small amounts of food a long way. So, but we've got to recognise that a lot of the things that we're talking about seem to be building in cost back into the system, and that, to a lot of people, consumers, business people, politicians, etc., is an anathema. And so we've got to explain that we're building in cost because it's an investment not only in the here and now and in people, but it's an investment in the future. And it's important to get that across to people, that because it costs more, it doesn't mean in the long run it's not better value. And again, this is something that Denise and Colin have both mentioned, is about reaching beyond the converted, because we're all here because we understand the message, and there's a certain proportion of society who are engaged who are interested in food. They're not necessarily foodies, but they understand the whole importance of sustainability, about the community approach and such like. But there's there's a huge proportion of society who aren't engaged with the land, who don't really care where their food comes from that much, as long as it gives them energy to go and do whatever they're going to do. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we've got to think carefully how we do that, how we focus on spreading the message and helping people understand, helping more people understand what we're talking about. I just want to kind of summarise again briefly what I've been saying. Not fast food, and it's not slow cooking either. Slow food is about good, clean, and fair. It can be cooked quickly. People on the market can cook very good food dishes in a few minutes just because they know what they're doing and how they're cooking it. In Edinburgh, I say we're trying to work out what good, clean, fair means locally. We're looking at where we can add value to the food process, and thinking again what we're working towards, and thinking about discussion points. These are for later on in the day. What might be in the way, and how do we overcome those things? And I'm just very glad to be able to quote Uncle Steve Jobs and say one more thing: chocolate makes the world go round. So, thank you very much.